get their
This
permission.
conference will now be
Right.
Okay, it's
Yes.
recorded.
being
Yes.
recorded now. Only
So
serious talk now. Only
yeah.
serious CSP talk now.
Exactly. So we would be recording, and I believe it is important that we let our audience and viewers know as well, because it's important that we inform people. It's a privacy thing. We do want to take at least inform. If not the consent, we do want to let people know that we're going to record the session, so that viewers who are not able to join us today, they would be able to watch the content at their own pace. Okay, so uh, I think we are just like 1 minute over the time. I'm gonna give like another minute for others to join, because I can see a lot of people are still joining in. And so just let's give 1 more minute and then we will get started. So yes, to answer people's question, that yes, we would be sharing the recording. It will be available on YouTube. Okay, so we would be sharing the recording. Once it is available, you would be able to see it on YouTube. All right, so well, thank you so much. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. Thank you so much for sparing time on the weekend to join us here today on how to think like a manager session. So this particular is a long list of series for various domains of your CISSP content. It is at the little advanced level, and I really want to thank Luke and our one of the important members, Prab, who cannot join us today. So we're gonna kick off the session without him, just for this one. He will be joining us in our next upcoming sessions, and well, we are. What exactly this session is all about, we're going to talk a little bit in a while, but we are going to understand everything about CISSP examination outline, domain by domain. And the good part, I do think it's a good part about the session, about this series, is because we are going to relate most of the concepts that is important from the examination perspective and mapping it with the real world examples. And I do want to thank Luke for his time in preparing and coming up with the content. And we're going to have a normal conversation, the casual. It's more like two people, two friends are talking to each other and discussing the CISSP on their weekends. So for everyone who have their questions, please feel free to type in your questions. I'll be taking all, we will try to take most of your questions during the end of the sessions. My humble request to everyone, please be on mute, because I understand most of us are working from home, and today happens to be a Sunday, so most of the people would be in our homes. So I do understand we have some kind of a sound coming from the background. So it's a humble request that please be on mute. And whenever you feel like you want to ask any questions, feel free to type in the chat box, and we'll be taking up all the questions. We'll try to take up all the questions if the time permits. Okay. All right. Okay. So first of all, Luke, thank you so much. And over to you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant. That was a nice little introduction. Hard to believe just like 3 minutes ago or 13 minutes ago, I was trying to get the kids and the wife out of the house, and it was like World War III trying to get those kids out of the house. My wife and I almost got divorced just like not even 15 minutes ago over what was happening to get your shoes on, get your ball, whatever, go. Yeah, it's funny getting an introduction from Prashant, because just like 6 years ago, we were emailing back and forth about his journey to the CISP. He was emailing me, and I was trying to answer him back. And he says I helped him a lot, but in turn, he also helped me a lot, because 2015, I was just starting out, and I was getting emails from everybody, and Prashant emails me, and everybody else emails me, and I was getting the vibe of everything. But his questions and the way he was asking me stuff, it helped me become, I guess, a better CISSP instructor. So I'd like to thank you for that. And it's funny that we're on a webinar now talking about the CISSP. Then he progressed to writing the Memory Palace, and now we're both book authors. And it's funny, maybe two people in this audience will one day also hold their CISSP webinars or whatever webinars years from now and say, hey, remember we were together on Prashant's and Luke's a webinar together, and now we're here? Maybe. It's a small world, you guys. It's a small world. And it's even a
Right,
smaller
indeed.
information security world because it's a small IT world. It's even smaller security world. So I say everything you do in security, keep it honest. Don't lie. Do your work properly. If you know how to do it, do it. If you don't know how to do it, don't do it. Because sooner or later, after 6 years of doing this, I hear the same names coming back. Oh, this person didn't do this. This person didn't do this. And the funny part is, one person's in America, other person's in like India, another person's in Japan, but I still know what's going on between all of them because security is not for everyone. We're a very small group, a very small and sharp group. All
Indeed.
right. So for think like a manager, if you know, everyone associates that with the CISP, and to think like a manager truly just means don't get it confused. It truly means to think of all the domains in the CISP domains, all of them. But there's no reason that we can't focus on how to think like a manager per domain, which is what we're going to do with this one, with domain one. All the headings that you see right now, understand and apply security concepts, all the five that you see, these are taken straight from the ISC squared syllabus. We were talking about should we use our own words or use our own headings. We just if you guys can recognize it straight from the syllabus, and I think it'll help to convey the message a little bit more. The webinar said these are advanced topics. How can they be advanced if you and I have access to the same book, same material, same everyone on this webinar has access to the same books that Prashant and I have. But what makes it that we can provide a more advanced kind of CISP training? It's just that some read their books, pass the exam, and move on with their lives. Prashant and I decided not to do that. Prashant, Prabhu, and I have said we're not going to do that. We've stayed on long after we've passed the CISSP, and I guess we didn't want the knowledge to go to waste. So along with that, to think like a manager is to focus on the book, but the experience is a bigger factor. And what we're going to do is apply what we know to a real world company and a very famous company that you guys already know, that your parents know, and maybe even your grandparents even know. So even if you don't see what the contents are of some of the syllabus, if you don't see it right now in this, if you don't get it right away, I'm sure as you progress and study through your books, you will make the connection that weeks from now, hey, Luke said this or Prashant said this, and it starts to make sense now, which is how every CSP video goes. Nobody gets it right away. It takes a while to kind of sink in. Okay, before we begin, everyone asks, do we need to study and what do we need to memorize for the exam? What do we need to memorize? It is not about studying and memorizing, it's understand and apply, because that's what it says in the ISC squared syllabus. It says understand and apply security concepts, understand and apply risk management concepts. You have to have a thorough understanding of things, and if you understand the concepts, you can apply them and the CISP will be yours. So really emphasis on the word applied, not memorize. Take memorize out of your vocabulary and just do memorize. To understand and apply security concepts, all it means is that you have to understand the three fundamentals of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, under which everything falls. We always say that security policy is the first thing to consider. Oh, management has to issue a policy. But they're only issuing a policy because they are following confidentiality, integrity, availability as well. These are top level. If you look through your Cybex and Sean Harris, there's a reason that the first chapter, the first few pages, talks about CIA right away. Any respectable CISP resource will talk about CIA right away to get you in the frame of things, because that's the first thing you got to learn. If you understand the CIA and all those concepts, you're good to go. That's all you need to know, which is kind of a trick statement because to understand the CIA, you got to know everything between the pages of those CISP books. That's all you have to do. Nothing, not a big deal. Not a big deal. Like, just relate everything to the CIA. I'll just do this right now. Prashant, just say any term, any word, any phrase from the CISP, anything that comes to your mind right now.
Okay, so firewall.
Firewall.
Talk about firewalls.
Okay,
Yeah.
good one. Because a firewall will applies everything about confidentiality. It uses encryption for IPsec connections. It uses hashing in those IPsec connections. And if you want a firewall to be available, then you get two firewalls. If one goes down, you have a backup instead. Firewall is also a technical preventative device, so it maintains confidentiality and integrity by denying unauthorized access. So you're maintaining it that way. Any other word, Prashant, that you think of? I'll throw out, let's see, something very different, like poly-instantiation, that very long word that nobody really knows what it means, and there's all these arguments about what that is. Poly-instantiation, that's at a high level, what's that got to do with databases, right? And
Right.
and all that. So database, that's poly instantiation is about maintaining database integrity. So you can't one thing represents another, it doesn't represent another. It maintains integrity and confidentiality.
True.
And right, and let's for our real world example, we're going to talk about Fujifilm's ransomware attack that happened back in June. We're not going to go into detail about it, but at a high level, it's a user downloaded a Trojan horse, a variant of called Qbot, which has been around for about 13 years, I think. And the Trojan horse had within it a virus. Once the virus got a hold of the network and found the important files, they immediately encrypted the files with a secret key. And just to take a quick side break, just real quick, in this case, where the attackers encrypt the files with a secret key and then hold it ransom for money in order to decrypt the data with the same key, what kind of encryption is that, guys? What kind of encryption is that? Same key to encrypt,
Symmetric.
same key to decrypt.
Symmetric.
So symmetric.
Symmetric.
Excellent. Excellent who said that. Yeah, good job. Symmetric right away. Same key to encrypt, decrypt. So ransomware is a real life example of attackers using symmetric encryption. And in a way, by doing this, they have made Fujifilm's data unavailable. They have affected one of their core security concepts. Fujifilm couldn't access the data on their servers in their Japan location. This is only in their Japan location, but they still have to shut down everything else around the world just to maintain that process, the flow of their business. You know, like users, third-party customers, supply chain processors. When this attack was happening, they weren't able to access the research and data provided by Fujifilm either. So availability right away. Anything you can relate anything to the CIA triad. I guarantee you that. You know, it's inescapable. You can't escape it. You can do that. Who's I'm sure some people have in those webinars that have taken the exam already and unfortunately has not passed it. Right? There's probably a few. And if you listen to what I'm saying and you look back and reflect on your exam and how it didn't go well, you can tell that everything did kind of reflect back to CIA in some way. Some way it did reflect back to the CIA. You can reflect most of the questions to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And if you also think about it, the attackers also had confidentiality. They practiced their own confidentiality by hiding the information from Fujifilm. So the Fujifilm was not allowed to view the information, their own information, because it was encrypted by the ransomware attackers. They held up their own confidentiality. Again, real quick, what is it? What's that familiar CISSP term where authorized people can't view legitimate data that they're supposed to be able to view? What kind of authentication error is that? Authorized people can't view what they're supposed to view.
Can I go ahead with this question? I really want to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's your type 1 error in the access control. That's what we call. I believe. I do hope it's the correct one.
Yeah, it's definitely
false rejection rate, I guess.
Yep, that's definitely it. And type 2 is when an illegitimate person does view the data. So we're making all sorts of CISSP correlations here. You can take a correlation of CISSP from one domain to anything, and if you keep this frame of thought in mind, then you're going to be unstoppable for the exam. No one can touch you. To think like a manager for this particular heading for domain 1, understanding and applying security concepts. This is how you think like a manager for this domain. Don't ever stop thinking and understanding CISSP, applying the CIA triad. Every CISSP practice question that you do, even if it is the most technical and focus on just one specific topic, still try to think how it might affect confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Force yourself to do that. Even every practice question, because if you do it during the practice question, you're going to do it during the exam. And once you get into this repetitive mentality, you can't help but do that, and you're going to become a much stronger security professional. So whether you read the book about encryption, RAID 5, database primary keys, it will always relate back to CIA. I guarantee you that. There's, or you can think of the opposite. What's the opposite, Prashant? CIA, a DAD, disclosure.
Okay, DAD, yeah, disclosure and alteration and destruction.
Destruction. So the opposite of availability is destruction. Opposite of integrity is alteration, and the opposite of confidentiality is disclosure. Nice. Yes,
Right.
destruction. So just think about that, CIA and DAD. You think about those two things, you're going to keep your focus in the CSP content so sharp that you're not going to steer away and you're going to avoid confusion and self-doubt, and you're going to be like, yeah, I can relate all this back to the CIA triad. I am sure the executives at Fujifilm are always thinking about the CIA triad, whether they know or care about the CISSP exam or even security. Because look, Fujifilm has been around a lot. I'm sure like everybody on this webinar has something, some product by Fujifilm. And I'm sure pictures taken of your parents, maybe even your grandparents, were probably with a Fujifilm camera. That's how far back they go. They've been in the game like a long time. They've been thinking about the CIA triad long before even ISC squared and CISSP even existed. They've been doing this. So it's not just something the ISC squared introduced to everyone, like, hey, we just learned about this new topic, confidential integrity and availability. No, this has been around for a long time. Otherwise Fujifilm wouldn't be here in business. They wouldn't be here for such a long time. They did not stop thinking about CIA, the availability of their systems. They had backups in place, which allowed them to recover from a ransomware attack. Oh, wait, I didn't even mention that. Yeah, they had a ransomware attack, and they said they refused. They refused to pay the ransom. How many other companies have really said that? Outwardly said, we refuse to pay the ransom. I mean, they're like straight up like the mafia. They're like, we're not going to pay your ransom because we already have backups in place. We're good with that. Okay. So just a quick, for the CIA triad and understand apply security concepts, the only security concepts you really need to know is CIA triad at a high level. Keep these at a high level at all times. And when you see something happening in the real world, like a data breach or someone's a data breach with credit card, health information, think about what just happened. Was availability affected? Was confidentiality affected? And this way you just expand out of the books and get a more realistic feel.
Right. And I want to bring out an important point here on the CIA, and it's even mentioned in the memory palace on the examination mindset, that whenever you think about security, think about CIA. That's the core principle. And while you're attempting the examination questions during your exam, always try to relate your concept with the CIA. Try to understand, try to narrow it down with these three concepts: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay. And the options that you would have got out of those four options, and by understanding the context of the question, if you are able to map it with these three concepts, most likely you will be able to narrow it down with the most closest choice. That's the best answer you need to choose. So whatever you think, and if the context of the question is asking you to choose, or probably ask that, think about what's the best thing you would do under this situation, or whatever the real world situation they have asked in the exam. And if you're able to relate it with the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, because like what Luke said, it boils down to these three concepts at a very high level, and you will be able to choose the most appropriate answer in your exam.
And let me ask you something, Prashant. When you took your CISSP exam, did you think about the CIA triad in every single question? Because I can tell you right now, I did not.
No,
it
came over the time. I mean, right now, when I go back and start explaining the concepts to a lot of people, then I realize that, yeah, it actually makes sense. So that's the reason it's a marathon. It's not a sprint race. So it's not going to happen. And because I remember back in the time when we were preparing, we didn't have much of the people out there. We didn't have much of these webinars. Neither we had any multiple resources. So I believe that's where the gap was. And I'm really fortunate that we are able to do such things so that the message actually reaches out to the maximum people.
Yeah, and the three things that I thought about during the CISSP exam, these are also very important concepts. Please take notes while I say this. The three things that I thought about was I hate this exam, I never want to take this exam, and I'm pretty sure I'm about to fail this exam. Those are the very three important things to keep in mind, guys. That'll pull you through. Right. And we took the 6-hour exam too, Prashant. Yeah. We sat there. We took the 6 hours, and I used 5 hours and 58 minutes of that whole thing. Like it was morning time, And when I was done, it was dark outside. What a thing to take an exam that long. Holy
Right.
cow.
250 questions, 6 hours. Right. It's a pain in the wrong place, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. So we just talked about understand. So look at these two differences: understand and apply security concepts, and now understand and apply risk management concepts. What's the difference? What's the difference? It's a very simple difference. Understand and apply security concepts is the CIA triad, and you apply those security concepts to risk management. And now you're going to apply risk management concepts, which is what we're going to talk about next. Remember this: the only risk that matters is the one to senior management, is the one to your boss or your boss's boss. As a security engineer, I work with firewalls a lot, and I always just worry that every night I'm just going to sleep worrying that one of the firewalls is going to fail. Because if that firewall fails, people lose millions of dollars in my company. Millions of dollars. I forget either a second or an hour. I think an hour. So if a firewall fails, I'm always worrying about firewall fails. Do you think my chief technology officer is sleeping at night worrying about the firewall failing? No, he's not. He's worrying about if we're going to lose money right away, or how we're going to move the company forward in a different direction. Hey, Wesley, how are you doing? So think about the risk to senior management. A pen tester, when he or she is doing pen testing, they probably they worry about the risk of touching a production system and bringing it down. This is a risk understood by them. The boss who told them to conduct the pen test, they aren't worrying about that. They're making sure that they're worrying about the fact that the pen tester is not going to find anything really critical, right? And missing deadlines is a risk faced by a project manager for a certain project. Senior manager doesn't care about that. They got bigger worries. For the CISSP exam, and when you look at the choices and the question, think about that long-term worry. What does senior management worry about? Don't care about what you worry about. Worry about what senior management worries about. For a security architect, placing the wrong device or a technological solution in the wrong part of the network that serves no purpose, that's a risk faced by the security architect. They worry about that. The worry the senior management has about that is all that money they spent on recreating the architecture of the network is gone to waste. That's what they worry about. They don't worry about a misplaced device. They worry about how that's going to affect everything else. Senior management cares nothing about any of the risks I talked about. They only care about one thing: success. The only risk that matters for each question on the CISSP exam is the risk to senior management. It's like when I was studying for the CISSP exam, I had a lot of risks too. But as the senior management of my own life, one of the risks was I had a dishwasher that wasn't working, and my exam was in 2 months. I was like, I'm not going to spend the money to fix a dishwasher or even worry about the dishwasher for 2 months because I got this exam to study. I can't waste that much time on a dishwasher. I'll just wash the dishes by hand. It's whatever. I probably wasted more time washing it by hand and getting it fixed in the first place. And these are the things senior managers have to think about. And so I can't let anything get in my way. And we're going to buy a house and we're doing the mortgage stuff. I was like, we're going to have to postpone buying a house, postpone having a kid, postpone everything till this is done. Because to me, senior management, I'm the CEO of my life. This was my biggest worry right now. This is the risk I needed to know. Because once I passed the exam, I knew I could do all those things. And for senior management, the risk comes in the form of human life, making profits, meeting business functions, and spending the least amount of money as possible while also lowering the amount of wasted work, basically. Same thing we all personally have decisions on our daily life. We don't want to waste money. We don't want to waste time. We want to make a little bit more money. We want to do better work. These are all your personal risks. So when you're taking the CISSP exam, after understanding your risk management concepts, and as you're trying to apply your risk management concepts, remember this: it's all long-term solutions. You think long-term. It's all about how to make the business continue to survive, not just right now, but forever. No business is saying, hey, I only want to be in business for 20 years. That's it. Then we're done. They're trying to go on forever. Prashant and I were talking about this earlier this week when we talked about how we're in the operations role, and we just can't say no. Like if management asks us to do something, we can't say no. They always want a solution, and we have to give it to them. So on the CISSP exam, don't look for solutions that stop after a short while. Look for the solutions that will help management increase and be successful. Even if you don't like your boss, even if you don't like your company or where you work and you're frustrated, they're still paying you, okay? They're paying money out of their own revenue to pay you to do their job. Make the company successful. it's hard enough to run a business as it is, but add information security and physical security risk and faulty computer programming and everything that's just going on, you've added a whole new bunch of risks they have to deal with. And by dealing with, they're spending money, they're hiring employees when they didn't have to before, and they're taking away from the real work that supports the business. Right? We be glad of that, because without all that, we wouldn't have a job. We wouldn't exist in a perfect world with no risk. We only exist because there is risk. And the day that risk is totally eliminated is the day security professionals we cease to exist. Which is ironically when both those things will happen on the same day. And we all know what day that is. That's when we all die. That's the day where risk will finally be done and we'll stop being that. That took a dark turn. That took a very dark turn. If it wasn't for this, I don't know what I would become. My parents are always, my parents are South Asian. They're like, you should be a dentist. It is a good job. There will always be work needed. But I was like, I don't know about being a dentist. I don't feel like talking to people for 5 minutes, asking about their family and vacation, and then proceeding to stick my entire hand in their mouth. I just can't do that.
Right.
But you know what's cool though, Prashant? It's cool that when people ask us what we do and we say our jobs, like I say, I don't try to make it easy on anyone. I'm like security architecture and network design. I just leave it at that. And they're like, oh, you mean cybersecurity? I'm like, yeah, information security. Because have you noticed that people who are in security, like actual direct security, they never say they work in cybersecurity. That's just a term for like people who don't know what it is.
True.
And
I'm glad that the people around you were able to understand when you said security. In India, there's when I joined my the organization, it was back in like more than 12 years ago. Now, when I used to say people that where do you work, I said security, they used to think like I used to sit in front of some kind of perimeter fencing, like guarding their fences. So like a physical security. People were not ready to accept that there's some kind of a role that is going to secure people's computers, network, firewall. They don't know anything about it. People were thinking like I was patrolling some kind of offenses at the night time, like a security guard.
Like so, you had one of those. You had one of those really long flashlights that you carry above, and you're like holding a dog on a leash and stuff, kind of thing.
Yeah. True.
Anyway, so yeah. Also, when you do that, when you tell them network security, when I say infrastructure network security, they can't marginalize it. They can't categorize me because they don't know what it is. They can't be like, oh, you're just this and this and this. Oh, you fix printers, or you this. So they're like, oh, well, just shut me up. I don't know what that is. Like, yeah. So what does it exactly mean to understand and apply risk management concepts to keep your business going? It means to understand all the risk techniques, processes, and terminology within domain 1 of your CISSP study guides. You have to understand things like CIA triad, BCP DRP, qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis, threat agent, asset valuation, the difference between risk analysis and risk assessment, accepting risk, mitigating risk. You guys heard all these terms. If you've heard all these terms and weren't able to make a connection, the connection is that they're all about risk, containing risk, managing risk, and lowering it to an acceptable level. You have to know the language that surrounds the word risk. If you do that, you're going to find the CISSP much easier to, what's that word for making it smaller? Compartmentalize. You'll be able to compartmentalize. Here's a neat trick. This is what I did while I was studying too. Write the word risk down on a piece of paper, and then around that word, write as many other words you think relates to the word risk from your CISSP study guides. Do this like a month away from your exam when you've pretty much studied everything. Try to write at least 20 words around the word risk that's associated with it, that you think are associated with risk. And I guarantee you, once you put with that pen to paper, you're going to be much more knowledgeable. And you'll have created a nice little mind map all by yourself. It'll do you a lot good to create your own mind map than to download a PDF of it or something, because you put an energy into it. Right, because the CISSP exam isn't a high school exam where I remember that I just used to go to the back of the book, look up the definition of a word, and be like, oh, I'm ready for the test tomorrow. And then I memorize it, and then bam, I'm ready for the exam tomorrow, because all it's going to ask me is the definition of the word risk. That's all I have to know. Prashant, let me ask, because that's not what you have to know. You have to know everything that surrounds the word risk. Just knowing the definition of risk isn't going to work. Prashant, let me
Right.
ask you in your own words. What do you think risk is?
Okay. So how I relate it, that anything that is going to cause a loss or any kind of an impact, that impact or loss is always going to associate itself with the risk. So when we say that what is the risk of not having a firewall? It's a long term. When we don't have a firewall, people will be able to connect to our network irrespective of whether we want them or we don't want them. So risk is people will be able to take out some kind of a data from our network. They might be able to compromise certain things. They might be able to make the data unavailable. So at the end, we will end up losing something. So it might be a financial loss, it might be a reputational loss, it might be tangible, non-tangible, something that has to be associated with the loss. That's how I think as a risk is.
Perfect. My definition, and I'll give you my definition of what I think. Mine is something you really hope doesn't happen, happens. And that's my definition. So you got Prashant's definition,
Right.
you got my definition, and now I'll give you Sean Harris' definition, which is the likelihood of a threat source exploiting a vulnerability and the corresponding business impact. Now, Sean Harris is a legend. What she wrote is very structured, very businesslike. You can read this 1,000 times and maybe not understand it. But what Prashant and I just said, you're going to understand that right away because he explained it in simple words. So again, this goes back to don't memorize the definitions of the words in your book. Try to understand and define on your own what it means to you. You do that, then you're starting accruing your own experience. You're not just going by what the book says. And the CISSP exam requires experience. Well, they suggest you have good experience. So give yourself that experience by providing your own explanation, because that's what experience is. It's just you understanding something yourself and not what the pages of a book have said. Now,
True.
Now, for a company like Fujifilm, I guarantee you they know all about risk, how to handle risk, how to manage risk, and are continuously improving their infrastructure to withstand risk. How do I know that? Because of their longevity. You don't get to be a business for too long in a competitive market like cameras and office supplies without worrying about risk. I mean, Fujifilm has been around since 1934, and they survived a very small risk to their organization back then. And this very small risk was, they overcame it. I don't know how they did, but they did it. It was called World War II. They survived World War II, and they're in Japan. So think about that. They're still in business after World War II. Uh, I assure you, the senior manager of Fujifilm, the 60 to 70-year-old Japanese super executives know all about how to manage risks to their business, as they've been doing so for decades. Decades. I mean, it's almost a century now. 1934. What year is it? 2021. 1934. My math isn't really good. Let's see. You know what? I'm not going to embarrass myself and do the math. It's almost a century.
Close
It's
to
almost
90.
100 years.
Close to 90 years.
Ooh, 87. Nice, Mervin. Nice. Got a got a mathematician. It'll do good. Don't forget your cost benefit analysis and your ALE calculations too, and your exposure factor. You're going to need that as well. So even if and they've been in business for almost a century, even if they don't use or didn't have available risk management framework, even if they didn't have like NIST 837, I assure you, at some point, still informally, they went through the steps of preparing, categorizing, selecting, assessing, authorizing, and monitoring risk. They had to have done that. All the same elements of risk management framework that you study about in your CISSP study guides and any other CISSP resource, they have been doing that, but without the actual framework. Just the sheer duty to help the business survive. I mean, again, they have to have done this, otherwise they wouldn't be here. Like, they aren't coming up with new risk initiatives or risk programs. Those are already there for them. They aren't talking about deciding which risk framework to use. What they are doing as far as risk is continuously improving themselves. Look at all these graphics. They established in 1934. They then, as a camera or equipment thing. Then they went on to create floppy disks in 1977. Then a FinePix camera in 2004. And now they've opened up a store in Japan promoting the idea of photography to the general public. So you've always innovated and always continuously improved. So for the CISSP exam, look for ways a company can continuously improve and not just hit a roadblock for one solution. Right? If they use a website, they're not going to use a website and their capabilities like that for 5 years. They're going to want more from that website. They're going to want more value. They're going to want more security. They're going to want more production value. And this is what, and continuous improvement. That's a CISP term. That's in your Cybex book. There's a whole heading around continuous improvement. Like, okay, they couldn't prevent the ransomware to their company. It's been happening a lot to other companies. No company's going to avoid ransomware forever. But they were so on point with all their other operations, with all their other understanding and applying their risk management concepts, that they did something that other companies couldn't do. They actually did two things that most other companies couldn't do. They said, we're not going to pay the ransom, and they restored their data back from backups. They restored it back into operation again. All I know is that Fujifilm's risk team and their senior management must work together in such harmony that they're always in a constant state of continuous improvement. So, as far as
let me figure out who the
sounds
person
like
is.
that sounded like my house about half an hour ago when the kids were trying to get out the house. So far as understanding and applying risk management concepts, Fujifilm has been doing this for decades. Just look to them as a good company. Their stock price has been going up ever since inception. As the times and threats change, such as with the introduction of risk of ransomware these days, IoT, industrial control systems, they've always been continuously improving. Yeah, they dealt with ransomware recently, but look at their reputation. I mean, they didn't suffer a reputation hit. It was, in my view, they improved. I might have bought Fujifilm stock right away because they didn't pay the ransom and they're able to restore from backups. That's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. Maybe they even set up their own ransomware to make this happen. No, they didn't do that. For this, I would say to think like a manager for this section, I would say always think about recovering from the realization of risk. As in, don't be naive and think that a security incident won't happen to you, or that the security incident will be small enough for you to handle and somehow survive. Any risk, small or big, consider it and prioritize it, but still consider it. Think about how to recover from it. Thinking about how to recover from something is probably going to be less stressful than always thinking about what new controls or safeguards to put in place. That's why when I go to sleep, I think about, all right, everything's going to fail at work tomorrow. Tomorrow, studying notes in theory is going to go down. Tomorrow, the ISU square is going to be found out to be the biggest scam ever, and the CISSP is gone. What do I do now? I'll just move on to SANS. That's probably the next thing I'll do. If you're always prepared for a disaster, it's more manageable time-wise when that disaster actually happens. Because go ahead, Prashant.
Yeah, I wanted to add a couple of points here when you were mentioning about that thinking long term. These are the very valuable points. Think of a situation, and it's for everyone who are preparing. I'm hoping that some of the people who have joined this conversation, they are preparing for the CISSP exam. So the idea is, when you think of any kind of a risk, all right, what you can see on your screen, it's like thinking long term. And take an example of Fujifilm. Okay, no matter how much money you're going to invest in a security posture, okay, it just take a person to click on a cute cat picture and get themselves impacted with a ransomware. Okay, it just take one wrong click. So it's done by the people, and that's the reason people are considered as the weakest element in your security paradigm. So when we think from a long term, see, taking a backup is a wonderful thing, and that's the reason Fujifilm had a courage not to pay the ransom. The reason they were this courageous because they knew that nothing will be impacted. They just had some kind of a little downtime, but they didn't lose anything. They didn't pay any money to the people who got this ransomware attack. So it's all about, like, if you want to prevent yourself, think from a long-term situation. What is the most effective solution here? Have your people trained and aware. Training and awareness plays a significant role, and it doesn't cost much. it costs nothing in comparison to any kind of a expensive solution or any kind of a controls that we buy from the vendors. Training and awareness is the best security control that you can implement in order to avoid such kind of a things. What the kind of a fate that Fujifilm faced, or the most recent organizations had, and like you might have read about the Accenture getting impacted with ransomware. So these are the things. Breach is inevitable. It is going to happen. You might have read about the analogy of the fancy bear about when we discussed about the APT. So breach is going to happen. Okay, one or the other day we can just try to thwart it. We just can try to delay that, but attackers are going to catch us. So we just want to protect ourselves a little better than them.
Yep. Like even for this webinar, Prashant told me he's going to handle the webinar, the presenter role, the recording, the audio, muting participants, managing the chat. He's going to handle all that, right? And I'll just do the webinar. That's why I do this with Prab and Prashant. They are complete professionals. You guys don't even know how on point and capable these two are, and they do this with such conviction and passion for the CISSP. One member recently who passed called Prab his brother from another mother, because Prab never gave up on him when so many others had. I think including myself. I may have gave up on him too. But Prab stuck with him. He stuck with him, and then he passed his CIS. And now him and Prab are just, he will remember Prab forever. I don't hear a lot of CISSP instructors calling people personally on their personal time and asking them for constant updates. Like, forget mentoring or asking. This is just, he wanted this guy to pass no matter what. This is like a personal mission for him. So this is the caliber of people you're dealing with, Prashant and Prab. But even then, this whole last week, I'm still thinking that what if the link to the meeting doesn't work? What if GoToMeeting has some sort of shut down? I guess I can fire up my Zoom or my WebEx. Or what if my microphone or speakers don't work? I'll have to switch to my laptop. What if my ISP shuts down this morning? Where am I going to go to do a webinar like this? I can't go to Starbucks or something. I'm not doing this in public. So that's why I turned on Wi-Fi hotspot on my phone. I called my cell phone company to activate hotspot so I have some sort of Wi-Fi and to charge me for the month, and I'll just cancel it later. Just so I have a backup and I can recover from any kind of emergency that could show up. Just so there's a way to recover from a disaster from this webinar if it happens. So in this sense, to prepare for any kind of potential disaster for this webinar, I did something that other companies do. I spent money to make sure I am properly able to recover from the disaster. I told my cell phone provider, charge me for the hotspot for the month just in case. Okay? So to understand and apply risk management concepts means to think like a manager by thinking about how to recover from risk or put in some kind of recovery or compensating control, and to think long term. And always keep in mind that continuous improvement just has to always happen. Okay. How you doing, Prashant?
Doing really great. Having the best time.
Good. Yeah. Good. Me too. This isn't like a very formal thing where I'm like, now everyone, now we shall study this and explain this. It's just like, I think we're not really talking about a lot of specific CISSP terms and concepts, which is usually the inquiry. But I'm telling you guys, if you just watch this webinar, if you read domain 1 all the way through, Cybex, Sean Harris, whatever, and come back to this webinar a few days or weeks later, everything's going to click. It's going to click for you. Let's move on to identify. You're right. It'll maybe even click for us too, Prashant. Who knows?
Yeah. The idea is not to give up. That's the whole point.
Nice, dude. That's exactly right. Let's go to identify, analyze, and prioritize business continuity requirements. Again, these are headings straight from the syllabus. You can find it right in the IC Square syllabus, which is free to download. I think you got to give them your email or something like that. Identify, analyze, and prioritize. Those 3 words pretty much tell you everything about not just BCP, but all processes you have to know for the CISSP exam. Whether it's incident response, you got to prioritize things during the incident response. Software development lifecycle, you have to prioritize during that. Learn to identify, analyze, and prioritize the components of each step. Because, the steps don't change. They're going to be the same general steps, but what happens in each of those steps should be prioritized. Like in the business impact analysis, the BIA is about prioritizing the important goals and functions of a business and the resources that keeps those functions going. Like if a business is an online shoe store, the primary business function of that business is to sell shoes online. They don't have a physical storefront, and they want to sell as much as possible, make as much money as possible. But say, for example, to run that store, you need like a BGP capable router or a high-end firewall that can handle millions of inbound network connections per second, really. And at the same time, you may also need a payment processor that handles the transaction of those sales from the website. So pretend you're in a business impact analysis meeting. You got to consider the BGP router. You got to consider the payment processor. Two very different things, two very important critical things to the business to run. Which one are you going to prioritize first? Which one has the higher priority? The firewall or router or the payment processor? Which one will have a more severe impact to the primary function of the business? Which one would help more to sell more shoes, basically? Is it more important to have high availability or to have a backup to the payment processing system? I don't know the answer. It depends on the organization, and you as a CISSP will be faced with that question at one point. I do like that, Stuart. Payment processor, without it, no sales. That's a strong argument. Security professional might say, well, if you don't have a firewall, all the payments coming in, these might be unauthorized access. Somebody might be trying to do a SQL injection on our website checkout. We don't know what we're doing. So you gotta decide. You gotta ask who's gonna yeah, exactly, Umesh. Depends on the who's gonna make that decision though. Prashant, is it gonna be you and me? Are we gonna make that decision?
Not at all. I won't even dare to do that.
Exactly. Like that's not me. You tell me what to do. Remember, you guys tell me what to do. I don't make any decisions.
Absolutely.
I don't think that way. So these aren't easy decisions, and this is why senior management gets paid. They get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars with millions of dollars in bonuses and golden parachutes if they ever lose their job. All that. So I don't discount high paid CEOs and executives. I mean, some of their salaries, I'm just like, wow, really, hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm like, I guess that's cool, but wow. So in this regard, what is Fujifilm's primary business function? It's to sell multiple products in the realm of photography, medical equipment, office machines like copiers and stuff like that. Basically, the stuff sell stuff online or in stores that bears the name Fujifilm. So when initiating their BCP DRP during the ransomware, they lost delivery of their products. They couldn't deliver their products. Everything came to a standstill. Their primary business function came to a standstill. And it became to a standstill because they lost the following critical resources that support that function. They lost network operations. They lost server operations, email, and a very important billing system. Because they lost all these 4 critical resources, they lost access. They couldn't perform their primary business function. What's that, man? What was that? Did I hear someone say physical security, something like that? So it's pretty much just like what we study in our books. When the CISSP, when the business impact analysis paragraphs in your books are talking about function and resources, there's a distinct difference. Function is what senior management is going to deal with, the decisions at the functional level. Critical resources is what Prashant and I deal with, making sure network, server, email, all that kind of stuff is working. And and what makes those online sales and network communications and server and data and all that, those are the business resources. So if you look at it from the top down. Primary business, that's got to keep going. Things that support that, critical resources. How do you keep those critical resources going? BCP DRP. That's where BCP DRP falls in the realm of all these 3. Function, resources, BCP DRP. Look at all the strategies they had for supporting their critical resources. BCP DRP supports the primary business function, but it directly first supports the critical resources, which in turn supports the function. So backups, hot site, high availability, remote VPN, fault tolerance, this is all what we do to support the resources, to support the function, which is exactly what Fujifilm did. They had all that in place. Thinking like a manager at this for this slide right here for this category means you always keep the primary business function in mind first, then think about what resources keep the functions going, and prioritize disaster recovery measures to keep those resources available at all times. I think for Fujifilm, they prioritize backups more so than high availability. They prioritize backups over users being able to connect to their corporate headquarters. The backups was the most important priority for them. Okay.
This is one of the interesting things where, and it is not only specific to CISSP but also to the general life. We all are security professionals. We deal with certain situations day to day. So what happens whenever we come across any situation and we think like, being a security professional, we can advocate not to do certain things because it might lead to a compromise. Well, it's our job to do. However, we need to understand we cannot dictate that. We have to make sure that the security policies that have been written down in our respective organizations, they are trying to support the organization's major objective. Whatever the vision or the goal that they have, we are just trying to support them. A security is just a support function. We cannot dictate or drive the business. We need to understand it. So whatever the goal of an organization is, to make sure that, for example, in the Fujifilm example here, the idea is to make sure that the resources are prioritized. They are able to cater the services to their end customers. They needed to have backup in place. So it is very important that whatever we create, whatever we are going to facilitate in our organization, it must support, or it should be in line with the organization's major objective. It should marry with the organization's goal. It's very important that we realize this, not only from a CISSP perspective, but also from your day-to-day job. It's very important that we try to provide any kind of a recommendation that is in line with the business objective. We simply cannot shove any kind of a controls to them and ask them that either we do this way, like either my way, or we are not moving forward with that. That's kind of an attitude doesn't work in the real life, neither in the CISSP exam. So it's very important to understand that.
And since I look at everything around myself as a potential, like everything I look at in what my eye sees of the speed of light reflecting back in my eye, I try to turn that into a CISSP practice question at all times. This is just how I do. So just by looking at this slide right now, if you're faced with a CISSP question, practice question or otherwise, and they ask you, what is a primary goal of BCP DRP? And your choices are network operations, server operations, restoring services, or delivery or upholding or delivery of products or primary business function. What's going to be the answer? Answer is right in front of you. It's going to be, if you look at it in this kind of graphic, in this kind of way, the primary goal is the one at the very top, which is the primary business function. That's it. And what Prashant said earlier, speaking of written policies, that's exactly what we're going to go into next when we talk about develop, document, and implement security policy, standards, procedures, and guidelines. Let me say something about security policy, standards, procedures, and guidelines. Without these things, there is chaos, uncertainty, erratic processes. These documents set the very foundation of what happens next in the organization. It's always about what happens next, never standing still. Like, how do you know that you have to implement IPsec for an organization? How do you know you have to implement security for data and traffic, data in motion? Because a security policy, a written security policy, set at a high level that data in motion going in and out of the organization should uphold confidentiality. A very high level statement in which we use the method of IPsec to implement. Right? IPsec is just a method of upholding that policy. We could have used many other things, TLS, remote VPN, all of that. So that's an example of upholding the policy. This isn't a perfect CISSP world, not always in the real world. And if we were to implement IPsec, how do we? If those of you who are familiar with IPsec and the configurations of it, how do you know what settings for phase 1 and phase 2 of an IPsec VPN tunnel to use? You look at a document, look at a standards document. There's going to be a document that says that. Again, in a perfect CISSP world, and even in my own company, we're a pretty good security company. You don't just pull that out of thin air. It has to be written somewhere for you to follow. And how do you know what are the steps to configure IPsec on a firewall? That's in a procedures document. Again, a document. And from my experience, if you're good at reading and writing and your company doesn't have a document of something, they're going to ask you to write that document. If there's no document and you ask, hey, where's there a document on this? They'd be like, oh, there is none, Luke. Why don't you write one? That's been my experience. And in the rare case that the other side of the IPsec VPN tunnel needs some custom configuration, like perfect forward secrecy or NAT traversal, then you need to know what practices should we as an organization use to meet the peer side. Like how do we deal with another customer who wants to build a VPN tunnel that has custom configurations? That would be the guidelines document. Right? So all come together: guidelines, policies, standards, procedures. Prashant, what did you say about documentation documents earlier this week? You said something about navigation, right? They provide some sort of navigation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I use this reference and analogy to explain the concept. So these documentations, these policies, procedures, your guidelines, your baselines, your standards acts as a navigation for you. The way you use navigation system to go from source to destination, you use your navigation to follow the right path so that you don't stock up in any kind of a traffic, you don't have any kind of a bottleneck to reach into your destination seamlessly without any trouble. That is the reason you use policies or standards or guidelines or whatever these documentation. It is going to help you in reaching to your organization's goal or meeting that objective, whatever you had, whatever your organization is like, have their mission 2025, they want to increase their profit from 12% to 15%. In line with that, we are going to create our policy so that we reach there. So without this, like what Luke mentioned, it will be chaos. It will be kind of an anarchy thing. We don't know what to do. So that's the reason we use this. It's just my way of explaining the topic on how exactly it works as a navigation.
And what you said, if they have a policy that says we want to increase, let's say in 2019 they say we want to increase sales by 19%, and then in 2021 they're like we want to increase sales by 25%. Everything changes, right? Everything kind of changes to accommodate that 25%, that increase.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
There was a really good example by Fujifilm about all of this, about standards, policies, procedures. And this parlay is really into what we're talking about. Look at this press release Fujifilm sent out during their after their ransomware incident. It says, this is their press release from Japan, from the head honchos, from the big guys. Fujifilm does have backups in place as part of its normal operation procedure aligned with its policy. What a great CISSP correlation this press release is. They do have backups in place as part of their normal operation procedure aligned with its policy. This is a gold mine line if you're studying for the CISSP exam.
Absolutely, yes.
Right? I mean, I was like, oh, I'm using this quote forever, because what they mean here is that part of their normal procedure in the company is to make sure their data is backed up. We aren't sure what data or how the backup is done, but we don't need to know those technical details. All we need to do is confirm the CISSP correlation of the terms procedure and policy, and see their application to the real world. So this is what you're studying about those terms in your books, and this is happening in the real world. Like they're telling you, we have a policy that aligns with the procedure of backing things up. But why did they have this procedure in place? What brought this procedure into existence? What allowed there to be a backup procedure for Fujifilm's data? The policy. The procedures are aligned with the policy of the company, the policy issued by senior management. That's a nice little tie-in to understanding the importance of developing, documenting, and implementing security policies, standards, and procedures and guidelines. Because one day, and every day, they will serve as a foundation or the catalyst to what to do and how to survive a ransomware attack. Because if Fujifilm didn't have documents in place, I mean, I'm sure they would still recover, but it would have been rough. It wouldn't have been as smooth as we read about it it would have been what other companies would have been like during ransomware. I can almost guarantee it wouldn't be a clean and quick response as it was. It would be a lot more hectic. It's like 3 weeks ago or a month ago when Prab and Prashant and I discussed starting this kind of webinar for everyone. Something different. We set the policy for this to go in motion. Then a week ago, Prashant told me that this webinar, he explained that he was going to handle everything in this webinar and how that's going to happen. I'm glad I knew this beforehand, before finding out during the webinar, because now I have a written procedure of what was going to happen. We set the policy that we're going to conduct this webinar, and Prashant and I made sure to follow the procedures and guidelines that aligns with what we talked about during our own meeting. We used our initial policy as the basis for all our procedures and guidelines moving forward. Thinking like a manager for this section, use policies, procedures, standards, guidelines, and baselines to chart the course for your company, like a map. Documentation like this is what keeps the organization running. And documentation equals actions. You know what I mean? Because, you're hearing me say this. I'm saying this. Luke Ahmed is saying this, whoever he is. He's some sort of CISSP guy. But you're understanding this not because I'm telling you this. You're understanding this because you've already done your reading in the book. Right now you're saying, yeah, I read this, and this person on this webinar is confirming what I read, and I understand it because I studied it so well. That's what's going on. It's not because I'm saying it. It's because you understand it so well. All right. Last one, and I think we're making good time, right, Prashant? We're about 2 minutes over, but we started 2 minutes late.
All right. Yeah.
Did you have anything for that last one? You don't. I can move
No,
on.
I think
I can move on.
yeah. I mean, I think we did cover it well, and it's important that we, in the end, it's all about at a high level concept, and that's what it's mentioned in the Sean Harris, that it's inch deep and mile wide, maybe like 40-mile wide. That's where we have to limit our understanding. That's very important.
Yeah, and yeah, that's good. So if you look at it, we've been through 4 slides, 4 of the headings from the IC² syllabus. They're not all of them. These are just the most important ones to relate risk back to. And the last one is understand legal and regulatory issues that pertain to information security in a holistic context. Holistic context, such an important combination of words. The thing about laws and regulations is that they're just so broad in nature. A lot of people ask us that, what laws do we have to memorize? What laws do we need to know about for the exam? And I'll tell you, this is a deep level understanding that I'm just going to share. The usual answer is you don't have to memorize laws or know GDPR. The question should be instead, how do we follow the law? How do we for the CISSP exam, how do we keep in line? How do we support the laws and regulations? How do we follow? It doesn't matter what we have to memorize. How do we follow the laws and regulations? Laws and regulations for any country, they don't go into specifics. They use a broad stroke. And companies find themselves just kind of guessing what the government wants you to do, trying to figure out as they go exactly what it means to be compliant or following the law. So what is the choices that companies have to follow the law, these broad laws that are spoken at a high level? What is the best way to follow the law of the land in terms of regulation and compliance? The best way to do that is by using well-established frameworks and processes. For example, if you're a company that processes credit card transactions and you want to do everything you can to avoid breaches or fines for not being legally careful about private data, are you just going to randomly just kind of say, hey, we need to make this data private? How do we do that? We have no idea how to do that. Well, there's a way to do that. You follow PCI DSS. Follow PCI DSS, which is a standard. And if you follow that and you still kind of break the law with credit card theft, the punishment and fine is going to be less severe because at least you followed an official framework. Same with if your organization protects the privacy of those in the European Union. If you don't know how to do any of that, follow the GDPR. It'll give you a nice little framework. This is how you follow and learn about laws and regulations for the CISSP. If you want your accounting and financial practices are doing what they're supposed to and not fudging the numbers and ruining the stock market, or get investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, get a SOC 1 Type 2 report, SOC 1 Type 1 report. These are why these frameworks exist. So instead of asking, do we have to memorize laws, instead ask, how do we follow the law to stay compliant and lawful? You ask that, then you'll never ask the other question again. There is a process or framework for any type of compliance or regulation that your company needs to follow. There just is. Again, understand and applying. not study and memorizing. And also for this heading, I just want to use more emphasis on those two words, and we're gonna wrap up soon. It's a holistic context. What does holistic mean? Google gives a perfect definition: characterized by comprehension of the parts of something as intimately interconnected and explicable only by reference to the whole, meaning how one little thing, one little decision can affect everything else. This is the same for government work, for organization work. This webinar, how every little thing we talk about is going to affect everybody else. It's the same if you're the boss in a mafia in the Cosa Nostra in the mafia too. One little decision is going to affect all your captains and all your other foot soldiers at the same time. Because I know this section is talking about legal and regulatory issues that relates to organization, but in actuality, and thinking like a manager and applying what we have learned, and just about everything about the CISSP means to think about things in a holistic context. All this stuff in domain 1 and every other domain is thinking at a high level about everything. Because again, if you're senior management, ultimately everything falls on you, to the reason why there's a financial discrepancy in your training reports, to why the garbage wasn't taken out at the end of the night. If Ted from data operations downloads that cute cat picture, he's not going to be on MSNBC or CNN or Wall Street Journal or Forbes explaining what happened. It's going to be the CEO. So for Fujifilm, this is straight from their website about their legal and regulatory vision. Aim for zero cases of misconduct and major legal violations. And to avoid legal violations, they're not just saying follow this law and this law. They're saying we're going to have good corporate behavior. We're going to have good code of conduct. We're going to care about the environment policy, the procurement policy. We're going to have a good corporate behavior and train. We're going to have e-learning courses. We're going to be careful about about group harassment awareness, and we're going to report it internally to our intranet. We're going to hold training programs, publish training materials for disaster prevention. We're going to offer sales of stockpiles of emergency at Fujifilm continuity of operations in the group. This is a huge holistic context. They're taking together everything to make sure they're under legal and regulatory compliance. I was going to say something else about this. I guess yeah. I just learned yesterday, Fujifilm's located in Japan, but they have companies worldwide. So they have to worry about things that some of us don't have to worry about, like massive earthquakes, typhoons, tsunamis, and nuclear reactor meltdowns, all that kind of stuff. And Japan isn't that big of a country. The geography is very small. So it's going to affect it at a large rate. So you have to worry about all those things as well. Thinking like a manager for this section, the best way to stay within the law is to have in place holistic frameworks and processes and ways of doing things. This is all just thinking like a manager for domain 1. Prashant Prabhanar are going to do a whole series in all the domains and how to think like a manager specifically for all the domains. And if you watch all the entire series, there'll probably be eight episodes. You will have more of a holistic view of the CISSP and information security in general than I hope ever before. That's it from me, Prashant.
Well, thank you. It has been a terrific experience, and I do hope our viewers would have gained a little extra bit, because I'm not anticipating anything too much.
Just a little.
Just a little. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you feel a little bit more comfortable than what you were yesterday, or you might have an understanding that CISSP, all the hysteria created around CISSP, and you might feel comfortable that now I think it is doable. Well, I think we're doing our job in a right manner. That's our whole objective.
That's it. Just that one. And if you just took one word, and if like one person out of this whole webinar found it useful, it's like what I say about everything I do. If one person finds it helpful, I'm good for the day. I've done my job for the day, and I think Prashant and I feel pretty good about that.
Absolutely. Well, we try to make our job, core job, is to make sure that we simplify, or in fact we will say oversimplify the difficulties of CISSP and present it so that you all, or probably everyone, don't have to do the same kind of a struggle. And that's the reason we try to bring it with the real world example, because what we feel, the real world examples like your Fujifilm, does a good job to map it with the concept, because doing a CISSP is a great thing. It's a all deserving accolade. The thing is, once we do the CISSP job, that's not where our job ends. That's when our real job begins. So how we can use the concept that we have learned so far over the past 6 months, 5 months, or the various sleepless nights? Well, this is where we try to map it down with the content. So that's the whole objective of the series, is to bring in domain by domain and try to map it with the real world example, so that we understand how exactly these concepts related with the real world, real situation. And it will certainly help in solving the questions in your CISSP exam, because they test you on the scenarios, real world scenarios, real world problems.
Yeah, just if everything was too advanced or too high level, or you just didn't see anything directly correlate with your CSP studies today, give it a few. Go ahead, read domain 1 of any of the books, read it, come back, listen to this webinar again. I'll publish it on my channel. I might publish it on this channel. Bottom line, you're gonna be able to read it, hear it again somewhere, somehow. And I assure you, things will make connections. So,
Yeah,
Prashant, I will see you for Think Like a Manager for Domain 2, where we do the same thing for Domain 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Luke, and thank you to our viewers. Keep watching out the space for episode 2 on domain 2 on how to think like a manager series. Thank you, and have a good night, good evening.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye, Prashant.
Thank you, Luke and Prashant.